She walked in, tired but hopeful. She had spent her life working hard, raising a family, and now, just for once, she wanted to treat herself. But the moment she stepped inside, she felt it. The stares. The judgment. The way the receptionist's lips curled into a smirk. "Can I help you?" The young woman at the desk sneered, her tone thick with sarcasm. The elderly woman, kind and soft-spoken, simply asked about her room. But instead of kindness, she got whispers. Eye rolls. Laughter. And then, the receptionist leaned in, voice dripping with mockery. "I don't think this is the place for you." But here's the twist. The very next morning, that same receptionist will stand before her again. Only this time, she won't be laughing. She'll be trembling. What happened overnight? What secret was revealed? And how did this elderly woman turn the tables in the most unthinkable way? Small Blue Diamond, watch closely, because this story will leave you speechless. Small Blue Diamond, before we dive in, comment below. Where are you watching from? We love hearing from our viewers. She wasn't expecting special treatment. She wasn't asking for much. Just a warm place to rest. A simple room for the night. But the moment she stepped into that grand hotel lobby, she felt it. The cold stares. The way the staff smiles faded the second they saw her. Her steps slowed. She adjusted the strap of her old purse, smoothing down her coat, as if that might somehow make her more acceptable in their eyes. She approached the front desk, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from age. Behind the desk, a young woman, flawless and poised, barely looked up. With a sigh, she raised an eyebrow at the elderly woman standing before her. "Can I help you?" The words were sharp, stretched out, soaked in false politeness. The elderly woman smiled, gentle, patient. "Yes, dear. I'd like to book a room." A pause. Then, amusement flickered across the receptionist's face. She glanced at her co-worker, lips curling into a smirk. "Oh," she said, tapping her manicured nails against the counter. Her eyes trailed over the woman's modest clothes, the slightly worn-out shoes, the small purse clutched tightly in her hands. "I'm not sure this is the place you're looking for." The words hit like ice. The co-worker chuckled, leaning in just enough to whisper, just loud enough for the elderly woman to hear. "I think there's a budget motel down the street." The elderly woman's face fell. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just nodded softly, whispered thank you, and turned to leave. Her shoulders hunched slightly. She clutched her purse a little tighter. And as she walked out, the receptionist shook her head, laughing. Some people just don't belong in places like this. She had no idea that the next day, she would be the one standing at the front desk trembling. Because the woman she just humiliated, she wasn't just any guest. And by tomorrow morning, she would hold the receptionist's future in the palm of her hand. Small Blue Diamond, have you ever been judged unfairly? How did it make you feel? Let us know in the comments. Small Blue Diamond, stay tuned, because what happens next will leave you speechless. The hotel was supposed to be quiet that night. Just another evening of wealthy guests checking in, bellhops carrying expensive luggage, and soft music drifting through the grand lobby. But something shifted. It started with a phone call. Not just any call, an urgent one. The general manager, a man known for his calm and composed demeanor, answered. And within seconds, his face drained of color. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You're sure? She's really coming?" A pause. A nod. A sharp inhale. Then, panic. He didn't go home that night. Instead, he stayed in his office, making calls, reviewing paperwork, and double-checking everything. By morning, dark circles framed his eyes, and his usual confidence was replaced with something else. At exactly 7 a.m., he called for an emergency staff meeting. The entire team was there, chefs, housekeeping, front desk employees, standing in silence as he paced back and forth. His hands clenched and unclenched, his eyes darting toward the entrance every few seconds. "Something big is happening today." His voice was sharp, urgent. "I need every single one of you on your absolute best behavior." Murmurs rippled through the room. A new investor? A high-profile celebrity? The receptionist, the same one who had laughed at the elderly woman the night before, leaned against the counter, arms crossed, an amused smirk playing on her lips. "Why the panic?" she scoffed. "It's just another VIP guest. Happens all the time." A few of her coworkers chuckled. But the manager? He wasn't laughing. His eyes locked onto hers, his expression dark. No. His voice was low, almost a whisper. It's not just another guest. And for the first time, the receptionist's smirk faltered. The air in the room tightened. A strange, heavy silence settled over the staff. Something was wrong. But no one, not even the receptionist, knew just how wrong. Not yet. Small Blue Diamond, what do you think is happening? Drop your guesses in the comments. Small Blue Diamond, stay with us. Because what happens next? You won't believe it. The hotel lobby was buzzing. Staff moved swiftly, adjusting decorations, double-checking reservations, and making sure everything was perfect. The receptionist, still lounging at the front desk, barely lifted her head. All this fuss for some fancy guest, she muttered, rolling her eyes. I don't see what the big deal is. Then, the automatic doors glided open, and in walked her, the elderly woman from the night before. Except, something was different. This wasn't the same woman who had walked in with hesitant steps, clutching her purse. This woman stood tall, her presence commanding. She was flanked by a group of sharply dressed individuals, their movements crisp, their eyes scanning the room with quiet authority. The receptionist froze. Her stomach dropped. What is she doing back? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Before she could process what was happening, the general manager, normally composed, professional, rushed forward. But he didn't just greet the elderly woman. He bowed. Welcome, ma'am, he said, his tone filled with genuine respect. It's an honor to have you here. Silence. The receptionist's breath hitched. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Her mind raced. Wait, what's going on? She stammered, looking around, desperate for answers. The manager cleared his throat, his gaze shifting to the stunned employees around them. And then he said it. Meet Eleanor Sinclair. A pause. The new owner of this hotel. The room fell in a stunned silence. The receptionist's jaw dropped. Her legs felt weak. This couldn't be real. The woman she had mocked, belittled, laughed at, now owned everything. And then, the elderly woman turned. And, for the first time since she walked in, she looked directly at the receptionist. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Because in her eyes was the quietest, most powerful revenge. And the receptionist? She knew. She felt it. And in that moment, she realized her fate was no longer in her hands. Small Blue Diamond, did you see that coming? Tell us your thoughts below. Small Blue Diamond, stick around, because what happens next? You won't believe it. The receptionist stood frozen. The air in the lobby felt heavy. Her once confident smirk, completely gone. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the desk, her mind racing for a way out. A way to undo what had already been done. But there was no undoing this. Not anymore. Because Eleanor Sinclair, the same elderly woman she had mocked, belittled, and dismissed, was now standing before her as the owner of the very hotel she worked for. And she was waiting. Eleanor took a step closer, then another. She stopped just inches from the desk, tilting her head slightly, a soft smile on her lips. But her eyes? Sharp, unwavering, powerful. Now, where were we? She asked gently. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. And somehow, that made it 10 times worse. The receptionist felt her throat go dry. Panic. I didn't know who you were, she stammered, her voice cracking. It was a misunderstanding. A nervous laugh slipped from her lips. A desperate, pleading laugh. No one else was laughing. Eleanor's expression didn't change. She simply nodded, as if considering the receptionist's words. Then, in a calm, measured voice, she spoke. Oh, I know exactly who I am. She leaned in slightly. The question is, do you? The room held its breath. The receptionist's chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths. No response. Because what could she say? Eleanor turned to the general manager, her tone as steady as ever. I believe in second chances, she said. The receptionist's eyes lit up with hope. For a second, just a second, she thought she was safe. But I also believe in accountability. Hope vanished. Just like that. The receptionist felt it. The walls closing in. The weight of her own actions crushing down on her. She shook her head, stepping forward. Please, I need this job, she whispered, her voice cracking with desperation. Eleanor let out a soft sigh. Then you should have treated every guest with respect, she said simply. She turned back, her eyes locking onto the receptionists. Not just the ones you thought were important. And then, the general manager cleared his throat, his face unreadable. You're dismissed, he said firmly. Fired. On the spot. The receptionist staggered. For a moment, she looked like she might argue, might beg, but she didn't. Because deep down, she knew she had done this to herself. As she grabbed her things and walked out, her head down, the other employees didn't say a word. Not one. Eleanor stood tall, watching her leave. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply turned and walked toward the private elevator, the one that now led to her office. The tables had turned. Injustice? 1 week later, the hotel looked different. Not in its structure, not in its luxury, but in its atmosphere. It felt different, warmer, more welcoming, more alive. And standing at the grand entrance, personally greeting every guest who walked through the doors, was Eleanor Sinclair. She smiled warmly as she shook hands, exchanged kind words, and made every single guest feel important. Because to her, they were. This wasn't just a hotel anymore. It was a place where everyone, no matter who they were, no matter what they wore, would be treated with the respect and kindness they deserved. And, under Eleanor's leadership, the hotel thrived, not just as a business, but as a home away from home. The staff followed her example, learning that true hospitality wasn't about status or wealth, but about making people feel valued. And as for the former receptionist, she had disappeared from this place. But somewhere, she carried the weight of a lesson she would never forget. A reminder that how you treat people when you think they have nothing says everything about you. Eleanor turned to greet another guest, her smile soft, yet full of meaning. No one should ever feel small, she said gently. No one should be treated as if they don't belong. And with those words, she turned, stepping into the lobby she now owned. The story had come full circle, and justice had been served with grace. How would you have handled this situation? Do you believe in second chances? Let us know in the comments. Sparkling Heart, if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And remember, always treat others with kindness, because you never know who they might be.